Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Which means, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. I bear witness that there is nothing worthy of worship except Allah and Allah alone. And I bear witness that the Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, is his last divinely sent messenger and the seal of the prophethood. Ameen. We want to welcome our friends and guests in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. I am pleased to be your host, coming to you once again through the Salam Media platform out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news, we advise you on what you can do about it. Today's program is a one-on-one with a very special guest. Our topic for discussion will be the freedom of oppression in France. France has a long history with Islam and Muslims that many of its flag-waving patriots would rather forget. Why? Because the disturbing residue of this sordid history is still with us today. Anti-Islam, anti-Muslim bigotry and oppression are going on right now in France in the name of freedom. And for this reason, today we would like to wade into the hornet's nest, to explore the roots of this ongoing conflict, and to examine the reasons why. What are its roots, and what can be done about it? I couldn't think of a better guest to have for this conversation than a Muslim scholar who has been targeted by the French establishment for many years himself. Dr. Tariq Ramadan has taught as a professor of contemporary Islamic studies at Oxford University, teaching in the two faculties of Oriental Studies and Theology and Religion. He has also been a senior research fellow and governing body fellow at St. Antony's College at the University of Oxford, and a senior research fellow at Doshisha University in Kyoto, Japan. He has been a visiting professor at the College of Islamic Studies, Hamad bin Khalifa University in Doha, Qatar, director of the Research Center for Islamic Legislation and Ethics at Doha, Qatar. He has also served as president of the think tank known as the European Muslim Network in Brussels. He is a member of the International Union of Muslim Scholars. Dr. Ramadan holds a master's in philosophy and French literature and a PhD in Arabic and Islamic studies from the University of Geneva. In Cairo, Egypt, he received one-on-one intensive training in classic Islamic scholarship from El-Azhar University. He has an ijazat he has teaching licenses in 7 disciplines. Through his writings and lectures, Ramadan has contributed to the debate on the issues of Muslims in the West and Islamic revival in the Muslim world. His research interests include the issues of Islamic legislation, politics, ethics, Sufism, and the Islamic contemporary challenges in both the Muslim majority countries and the West. He is the author of a number of books in Arabic, English, and French. He has been a well-known lecturer throughout the world on theology, ethics, social justice, interfaith, and intercultural dialogue. And with that said, I want to welcome my brother to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hajj Mauri, how are you doing? Thank you for inviting me again.
Alhamdulillah, brother. I'm doing fairly well, all things considered. How are you doing, and how's the family?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. We are fine, and the family is fine. And as you know, you are in touch with my my daughter, and she was
Yes,
involved in everything, organizing this, and I want to thank her from where we are. But
absolutely.
alhamdulillah, the family is fine, and my health is ups and downs, but that's fine, much better than before, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, brother, let's just jump right into this firestorm of controversy raging in France right now, among other parts of the world. Uh, I want to begin our conversation with you placing what we are seeing today in France into some historical context. What has been the relationship of France with the Muslim world, and how far back does this relationship go?
Yes, I think it's the right question, because we can't talk about what is happening in France without getting the historical context, and today the political context as well. So I think that if we want to understand what is happening, there are three main factors that are important when it comes to Islam and Muslims in France. First, you can't deal with the issue if you don't get a sense of colonization and the relationship between France and Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, and North African countries. Because this is essential. This is essential. You cannot get the picture of what is happening now. Why? Because, for more than 130 years in Algeria, the French colonization was there. And the way they were dealing with Islam is very much mirroring what we see now. Why? Because, in fact, what they were saying about Muslims, in fact, as you know, the perception of colonialism for the French, and not only for the French, the British was the same, and all the colonizers had the same idea. We go there to civilize these people because they are backward, and Islam is, a hindrance to economic and intellectual development. This was the perception. So they were going to Algeria with this in mind, and their perception was that not only they were dealing with a backward culture, but Islam in itself was a hindrance for economic development and even, intellectual freedom and emancipation. Having said that, we also should get something which was connected with their perception of Islam. What we call laïcité today, and the French very specific secular system was really done with the idea, for example, in France, in France itself, was to separate religion, politics from religion, the state from religion. And they did this in France, at the exception of Algeria. In fact, the way they were dealing with Muslims in Algeria was, we are not going to implement the same. So the democratic process that you have in France was not what was expected from Muslims, because in fact, the relationship between Islam and democracy is not so essential. So we can decide for them who is going to talk to us as a Muslim leader. So it was a top-down strategy. We decide who are the right leader. And of course, as you know, the right leader were the leader who were not resisting the French colonization. This is one. The second, even Ibn Badis in Algeria, while he was creating Jam'iyat al-Ulama, so it's this organization of Muslim scholars, was himself, he was the leader of the resistance intellectually, was asking France, please implement laïcité in Algeria. Why? Because he wanted to separate the French political control on the religious reference and the religious leaders. And they said no. Why? Why didn't they want to implement laïcité in Algeria? For one reason: to control the leaders, to control the resistance. So get this, because this second point is essential when it comes to what we are dealing with today. And the third, by the way, that we also need to get from the very beginning is the perception that Islam in itself, as a religion, has a problem with modernity. And we need to get this because, there is something which has to do with scholarly racism, meaning it's not the racism of the ignorant, it's the racism of the people who are educated. Like Renan, for example, who had a discussion with El-Avrani. He had this idea that you cannot be emancipated and intellectually free if you don't speak French. So the Arabic language in itself is a feature for backwardness. So if you get this, you understand that it's very deep. It's a very old story. It's not new. So come to what is happening now. Three things are here, still here. Muslims, by definition, will have a problem with laïcité. Second, Muslims don't need, a bottom-up way of organizing themselves. Let us decide for them the way and who is going to talk to us. And the third, it's all about controlling them. Because what we are saying as Muslims in Europe, we don't have a problem with laicity and the secular system. That's fine with us. If and only if you implement the system on an equal basis for all of us, all the citizens, not a very specific way with the Muslims, as you did during, colonization in Algeria, in North African countries.
Mm-hmm. What is the percentage of the population of Muslims in France today?
So that's a good question, because nobody can tell you, because there is no, in the way they are dealing with, they don't want to know about your religious affiliation. So you are considered as a citizen. So there is no figures, nothing. Approximately, they are talking, for almost 20 years, they were saying between 4 and 5. Now they are acknowledging it's more than 6. And it might be that it's even more than 8, meaning that it's more than 10% of the French population. And the majority of them are French Muslims. So what it means here is that they are not resident. They are French Muslims. French meaning they have the citizenship and they are Muslim at the same time, which is completely new. In fact, that's the point. That's exactly the point. Yesterday when they were talking about Muslims, it was first generation of people, that we put outside, the city, in the suburbs. They were among themselves. They were not mixing with the society, and that was fine. Now what is happening is that the sons and the daughters of this first generation, and what we are reaching the 5th generation, are now more visible. And it's because they are more visible that they have the impression, they don't want to integrate. That's the opposite. The fact that they are visible is the way for you to get it, that they are part of the society and they are everywhere now. So it's the other way around. And it's exactly what, a sociologist, Jocelyne Césari, was saying. There is a misunderstanding in the whole issue, because the perception in France is that when you start building a mosque for the French psyche, it's as if it means that you don't want to integrate. You want to be on your own. And she was saying it's exactly the opposite. To build a mosque means we are at home. So we want to stay, we want to mix, we want to be part of the society. So the signal of your presence with mosques is for this, majority non-Muslim society. In France, it's not the same in the United States, it's not the same in many Anglo-Saxon countries, is, okay, why do you build a mosque? Just to feel at home. We want to feel at home. It's not a signal that we don't want to stay, it's the opposite.
Mm-hmm. Tell me this, in concert with what you, I should say, in response to what you just said about how Muslims are becoming more visible in French society, despite this very strong and government-backed effort to separate religion from the rest of societal life. It just came to my attention just recently that in the land of freedom, you may lose the freedom to choose your own doctor. if I understand correctly, there is proposed legislation in the French pipeline to punish citizens who insist on having a doctor of the same sex. Is this true? And if it is this primarily being directed at the Muslim population, do you think?
I think that, we have to be fair, and at the same time, we have to be clear.
Uh-huh.
When it comes to be fair, I think that, as we said at the beginning with your question about history, we have to put things into context because, France doesn't only have a problem with Islam. France has a problem with religions. And it didn't
Across the
start
board.
exactly. It didn't start with Islam. It started with Catholicism. Because the laicity was in fact a way to deal with the power of the Pope, just to circumscribe his power in order for the state to be independent. This is one. The second, it also happened with the Jews and it happened with the Protestants. So this perception that religions are putting, the autonomy of the public and political spheres at risk. It's not only with Islam. So we need to get this.
Okay.
Because you are dealing with a perception which is completely different from what you have in South Africa or in the United States of America, where religion, the only fact, for example, that you can think of religious leaders promoting social solidarity, the whole thing of Martin Luther King and all this, religious organizations is perceived as against the very autonomy of the French or the unity of the Republic. So it's a perception that at the end, religions, yes, should be separated, but at the same time, there is a danger in anything which has to do with religion. So this is the climate within which we are navigating as Muslims. So it should be quite clear, and this is why I'm saying we have to be fair. Don't get us only against Islam. There is a religious question. So the question of religions in France, it's essential. Second, it's true that very often some politicians are hiding behind, global discourses to avoid mentioning the fact that they are targeting Muslims and Islam. So it was quite clear about the headscarf. They were saying, the visible signs. Also, it was not, they were not talking about the cross. They were not talking about the kippah. They were talking about the headscarf of the Muslim women. So this is one. The second is about, for example, you go and you want to eat halal meat, or at least tell, I just don't want to eat meat. That's my right. And to the point, it's so extreme that to the point say, no, anything which has to do with the diversity of, anything that you have to eat, cooking and anything which has to do with the diversity of meat, for example, is going to be perceived as against the laicity. So what's this? Laicity, it's as if, it's just this one, a unique way of eating, a unique or a single way of being with, your environment. It's crazy. So it's an extremist reading interpretations. And by the way, we have been, for myself, for example, over the last 25 years, I have been talking and working with so many, philosophers and thinkers and politicians who are dealing with laicity, and there are many interpretations of laicity, saying that it's not as narrow as it appears in the discourse of the people who are using laicity as a weapon against the Muslim presence. And you can see today that the far-right parties, the populists, are using, laicity. It's as if it's a new religion that we are using against the presence of Muslims. And this is where you can see, for example, when it comes to the, it's normal in any civilized society. It's up to you to decide to whom you want to go as a medical doctor. It could be a woman, it could be a man, and oh no, if it's a Muslim woman asking for a woman, it's not her freedom. It's because she is behaving in such a way because she's a Muslim, or her husband is imposing onto her to do so. So you get that. It's the interpretation is completely diverted and distorted from the very main discussion. The discussion is, I am free to go wherever I want. Why now are you questioning my freedom because you have suspicion about my belief? So in the name of your suspicion, you restrict my freedom. What's that? Where are we? In which society are we now? So in this climate of suspicion, we are narrowing, the sphere of our freedoms within the society. And it's as if when you are exercising your free or your rights or your freedom in this society, you should always ask yourself, how is it going to be interpreted? Because I am a Muslim. So you are targeted out of suspicion, and you end up sometimes being you are self-censoring yourself because you are scared of the perception of the people around you.
Yes. Dr. Ramadan, a good friend of mine by the name of Enver Massoud, the founder of the Wisdom Fund, recently commented on the rising tensions in France in the wake of that tragedy that unfolded not long ago. I'd like to hear your thoughts on what he had to say. This is what Brother Massoud said in a statement he made for the Wisdom Fund. He said, quote, Macron should have said, yes, we have freedom of expression, but we also have a duty to be considerate, respectful, gracious to others. Yes, we have freedom of expression, but a free people often discourage use of vulgar speech. So as president, I will defend Mr. Paty's right to free speech, but I condemn his use of that right in this disgraceful manner. I remind Mr. Paty, our national motto is liberty, equality, fraternity. Of course, this killing is wrong. It goes without saying. French courts will deal with the killing. Macron doesn't need to provoke Muslims worldwide, thereby creating a bigger issue. The killer showed his barbarism. Macron had a chance to show his humanity. Macron showed his hypocrisy. 16 European countries, including France and Israel, have laws against Holocaust denial. In Austria, David Irving, the historian, was imprisoned for questioning the Holocaust. In the US, speaking against Israel or Zionism can get you barred from news and social media and deny you a job. In India, an advertisement for jewelry worn by a Hindu Muslim couple had to be withdrawn after outrage by religious zealots. Israel, supported by the US, by withholding its participation in the Madrid Peace Conference, forced the UN General Assembly to revoke Resolution 3379, adopted on the 10th of November 1975, which had called Zionism a form of racism, and justifiably so. Free speech, only when it suits those in power. Your thoughts on what Brother Massoud had to say, and what, in your opinion, are some of the things we in the international community can do to help remedy this ongoing problem in France?
I think once again, what he said is completely true. And I think that even in France, once again, we have to be quite clear on this, because as I said, the national climate atmosphere in France is pushing and pushing, and we are already preparing the next election. And Macron knows something. He's not going to win against any other traditional party. There is one party, which is the far right party, le Rassemblement National, which is the former Front National. It's the National Front. These are the far right party, and he understands now, and he is pushed from behind by many political forces, telling him the only way for you to win the next election is to create this political climate where you are only going to face Marine Le Pen. Why? Because Marine Le Pen, certainly she's going to lose. She's not going to win. It's impossible for her to win the election. Now, the problem is that she might lose the next election, but her ideology and the way she is dealing and normalizing this populist views and far-right perceptions of far-right political opinion, it's not normalized in France. So Macron is pushed in that direction. He was not like this when he at the beginning, he thought that he would be able to deal with Islam and Muslims in another way. This is why what he said recently, it's, revealing the very political climate. And the very political climate, it's not about, nuanced position. It's very much this rhetoric that you had in the United States of America just after 2001 is you are with us against us. So meaning now, if you come and say, you know what, yes, we are for freedom of expression, but freedom of expression, as our brother was saying, but also like, for example, Trudeau was saying in Canada, he said exactly the same. He said, you are free to speak, but you have the responsibility to use your freedom in a wise way. Because you are dealing with people of other faiths, you are dealing with sensitivities, you are dealing with, spiritual matters. And it matters that you have to be very cautious not to hurt the people with this. And in our tradition, لا تسبوا الذين يدعون من دون الله. So we know from within our traditions that we don't have to insult the people who and the believing what the people are believing in order not to hurt them, because at the end they will do the same to you. So you have the responsibility to avoid it, and you have the responsibility to avoid the consequences of it. So this is something which is a wise position. This is not what is happening in France now. It's in the name of freedom of expression. You have to go as far as you can, to the point that it's vulgar, to the point that how come a teacher, and we, as you said, and as he said, we have to condemn what happened to the teacher. At the same time, we have to say that we can be hurt to see that he showed such vulgar cartoons to young boys and girls, reaching not more than 11 years old. This is what it is. So we need to come, and this is where I would say that there is a lack of wisdom in the whole discussion now in France. It's now conflictual. It's very much about polarization between two camps, and some are pushing and speaking. If you say yes for freedom of expression, but a kind of wisdom in the way you use your freedom, and it's not because it's allowed that it's good. Of course, it's allowed to insult, but it's not good. So we are here for the good. We are not only here for my rights, my rights, my rights. So this wise discourse, this is where, as I would say that in time of tensions and pressure, it's important for us to ask ourselves as American, European, French, or whatever Muslim citizens, what is our contribution in the debate? So to keep on repeating, it's wrong and you are insulting us, it's not enough. This is where we have to come with something which is a moral standpoint, where whatever you say about us, whatever you are, whatever is the way you deal with freedom of expression, our contribution to the debate is three things. Yes, we are and we want freedom of expression. And by the way, we don't want it only in France or in the UK or in the United States. You want you, our fellow citizens, to be with us saying that we want freedom of expression in every single country in the world. We want you to be with us when it has to do with China, when it has to do with everywhere in the world, with the dictatorships in Egypt, for example, or in African countries, with no selection. Don't come to tell us you are for freedom of expression and you keep quiet when it has to do with Gulf states or it has to do with China, because their market and their money make you shut up when it comes to the true discussion. This is one. So our moral standpoint here, our presence in the West is yes for freedom of expression everywhere for everybody. Even if there are opponents in some Muslim majority countries you don't like, we're not asking you to support the people you like. You support freedom of expression even if you don't like them. Because at the end of the day, any political activist who is in jail because of his or her thought is wrong, period. That's one. Second, which is also important in our way of dealing with freedom of expression in the West, is to say, yes, if you want freedom of expression, it has to be on equal footing. So now tell us, are we or do we have the right to speak about everything? So do I have the right to ask the true questions and the right questions? Why are you asking me to accept your insult when you don't accept my critical questions about things that are happening in the country? So why is it, for example, when I ask why the police is acting like this, why the politicians are doing so, why this one has the right to talk on TV and to be part of the process, to say things that are wrong and promoting fake news, and you are talking about he has the right and I don't? So if we talk about freedom of expression within the country, it has to be on based on equality. And the last thing that and this is also something which is important. Let us, I belong to my principles first. I don't belong only to a country. So yes, I'm French, I'm Swiss, I am an American, but I want to deal with principles. And here we have to say, okay, freedom of expression everywhere and to everybody. Second, in this country, it has to do with equality and justice. So if I ask a question, how is it, for example, and I am a good example, for the last 25 years, you talk about freedom of expression, how is it? Why is it that over the last 25 years, I was not able to talk in one French university? And you talk about freedom of expression, how come? How come you are talking, when I come we have a venue, you send intelligence to tell them, be careful, you have to avoid and you have to cancel the meeting. Why? Is this freedom of expression? So there is a freedom of expression for the white middle class and the people that you like, and not for the others. Why? And are we saying something which is illegal? So this is the second. And this is where it's important for us to understand that it's not only a question of Muslims promoting, the right for Muslims. Our moral position in the West is to say equality for all. African American, Black people, poor people. Let us come to the real issue and to understand that if we talk only about Islam, it's wrong. But if we put Islam and Muslim within the big picture, this is where we are going to be hurt. And the last thing is to keep on saying, whatever you say, whatever you do, you know what? We are following an example. We are following the messenger, the prophet, peace be upon him. And what we got from him is, when you insult me, I smile. And if you want to attack me, I say peace. Because the only thing that I want in this society is, yes, freedom, but I want dignity. And if in the name of freedom, you are ending up being undignified human being to the point that you are ready to dehumanize me, I'm not going to follow. I stand and I will be an example within this society. So avoiding, insult, emotional reactions, and to come to this. So I think that we have to think about our contribution in this discussion. Our way of responding will be the greatest example and the greatest teaching we can give to the people. And this is what, just one example. When it started with the cartoons in Denmark, I was there, and the young wanted to fight, and to even they were ready to go for a demonstration. My answer to this was to write a book about the Prophet Salam. In the footsteps of the Prophet was the reaction to what happened in Denmark. Just to say, you want to know about the Prophet Salam? Here we are. We are not going to insult. We are not going to react. You know who published the book in Denmark? The very newspapers which in fact started the cartoon discussion and the cartoon. So I think that we have to get this right in our way of promoting something. And I would say to Muslims today, please don't think of yourself as victims, but think of yourself as models. Don't think as being people targeted. Yes, you are targeted. Now, how do you get out of this? By repeating that you are victims, by repeating that you are targets, or by transforming the fact that you are victims into, you might want me to be a victim. And you know what? I'm trying to be a teacher. That's the way forward.
You mentioned the upcoming French elections. When is the next presidential election in France, and has the political climate in the U.S. influenced the climate in France, in your opinion, to a large extent?
It's in 22 that we have the next election.
All right, 22.
May 22, yes. So now the situation in France, it's very difficult for many reasons. First, because over the last year we had a social movement that was targeting the governments and very much opposing the government for 10 years, almost paralyzing the society for the economic reality of the country for almost 10 months. And then the COVID-19 came, and it's very difficult. And it's quite clear that what I call the political strategic distraction coming from the government. Let us talk about Muslims. Let us talk about Islam. Let us talk about laicity, in order to avoid talking about social issues and social problems and education and even the health system, which is very much in danger with what is happening with the pandemic. So yes, in fact, what is happening in the United States had an impact. But let us think about it the other way around. 15 years ago, when I was coming to the United States of America and giving lectures there, I was not aware, or I was not predicting or envisaging that something like what is happening in France will happen in the United States of America. Before 2001, it was quite different. And my perception was, so it was more than 19 years ago, and then suddenly, this discussion that we had in Europe about the fact that the Muslims are now silently colonizing Europe, this old Arabia coming from these people saying, be careful, because now Europe is just under a Muslim colonization, is silent, is legal, and it's dangerous. So what happened in 2001 and what we got over the last years, even with Trump, and by the way, be careful just not to separate Trump from the or the American context, because it's coming once again from very far. He's just more visible and more vocal in the way he's saying things that we saw in policies and in way of dealing with Muslims over the last 20 years. And it started, of course, even before 2001. But after 2001, the Patriot Act, the Homeland Security, all what we had afterward is it's a long-run strategy also to stigmatize and to control the Muslim and to put them to monitor them. So all this that we had in the United States of America, plus the political discourse that we had on Muslims, that they are, a practicing Muslim should be a suspected Muslim, because practicing it's too much. Practicing means that you are serious about your religion and you take your religion seriously. And then your way of talking about international issues. You should not talk about what is happening in the Middle East. We should not talk about what is happening around the world. So all this is mirroring what we have now in Europe and what we had in Europe before. So it's like a pendulum. It started in Europe. It came to the United States of America. It's coming back. And in fact, at the end of the day, if you look at the West today, what we have beyond the crisis, beyond the French crisis we are talking about right now, is something that is transversal in all, crossing the board in all European countries. To the exception of one or two who are dealing differently, but anything could happen. But it's quite clear that in Canada today, things are a bit different from what we had in the United States of America. But and you have, important countries. The United States of America, it's a very important country. In Europe, France, it's a very important country. Because at the end, as to the Muslim community, this is the biggest Muslim community in the West. In percentage, if you look at what is happening, it's even more than the States. So you are 10, 11% of the global and the overall population in France. It means that it's very serious. So what is happening in France? I thought the opposite at the beginning. When I wrote the book To Be a European Muslim, my hope was Europe is going to have an impact on the French way of dealing with issues. Mm-hmm. And in fact, today it's the other way around. France, it's very much impacting, other policies at the European level. And what happened in Austria right now is also, again, something which is, be careful, because now we are dealing with radical Islamism and political Islam. And there is also something that we have to say. This is going to be crossing the board. And I'm very concerned about the fact that the Muslims and the Western Muslims are very much accepting something which is confused terminology, lack of semantic clarity. When it comes, for example, when you speak about Muslims, and when you speak about political Islam, and when you speak about Islamism, what do you mean? What do you mean exactly? Because at the end, I'm sorry, the people who were involved in politics as Muslims or in what we are calling political Islam, many of them were not radicalized and where they are not violent. And now if you look at Macron and you listen to what he was saying, and even his interior minister, he was saying, in fact, the Islamists that he is referring to are the literalists. Okay, hold on. What are you talking about? Who are you talking about? Who are these people that you are talking literalists? Are you talking about Saudi Arabia? So your economic partner? Who are you talking about? Who are these people you are referring to? So this is not acceptable for us. As Muslims, we should, take over and also determine and decide for ourselves the terminology and the definitions of some of the words that we are using. If we don't do so, it's going to be defined by somebody else or some political structure and some ideologies, where at the end of the day, how are you going to define a practicing Muslim? Mm-hmm. Remember that in Tunisia, under dictatorship, the dangerous Muslims were the Muslims going to pray Fajr in the mosque. So they were monitoring the mosques. We know the story. We know the story. If you are practicing and a serious Muslim, so you might be a danger for the society. So are they going to be the model for us today? Because what we are having now, it's, the French people saying, we are dealing with the Moroccan government, with the Tunisian government, and they know how to deal with these people. For example, over the last 4 days, the interior minister was in North African countries to talk about these issues. To talk about what? Why do you have to go to North Africa to speak about the French citizens? What's wrong with your citizens? Yes, what is wrong is that you don't trust them, and you need to get a way to monitor them. So the starting point is too much practicing means suspected Muslims in his or her way to be radicalized. And that's very dangerous.
In reference to what you just mentioned about how French policies are impacting other parts of Europe, what about other parts of the world? Right now there's a tremendous amount of social and political turbulence in Lebanon, in Guinea, West Africa. How much does how much of an influence do you think France has um, in this turbulence that's taking place in other countries that were formerly, French colonies?
Now, the French influence, there was a way of talking about the French presence or the French influence in Africa. It was called France Afrique, France
Hmm.
Afrique, African policy.
Right.
So this is a very old story, and we were told that over the last 20 years, this is over. France is not so much involved, not the same way. What is true that we know today is that there are new players. Of course, the United States of America are still very much playing a very important economic, political, ideological role in Africa. The new player that we cannot avoid and we have to get it right is China.
Right.
China is very much involved in Africa, and the one that we are not talking about, who is very active, and the state is very active with many different interests to protect, is Israel. So you have new players in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Now the French are here. They lost ground, and still they are very much involved, and especially in the French-speaking African countries. Mm-hmm. Very much so, and what you were referring to. Now, they are very much involved, and for example, they were dealing with Morocco in order to train the imams in all what we call la sous-région. So it's sub-African, sub-Saharan countries. So it's Senegal, it's Mali, it's Niger. All these countries were, in fact, asked to have the imams within an organization where they were going to be trained by Morocco. By the way, remember as well that France had an agreement with Morocco to send some of the French imams to be trained in Morocco. It's as if in Morocco you have the right way of teaching Islam. Mm. So as to Islam, and I had many brothers, ulama and a'imma that I was working with. They were telling me we go to Morocco and we have a discussion there. France is very much involved. And by the way, France is now shifting from Algeria to Morocco in order to control who is going to represent the Muslims in France in the coming years. So, and it has to do with African countries. So you can't get the reality of what is happening at the French level if you don't understand three things about France with Muslims. It's still its connection and its economic interest in Africa. So, for example, if you understand that France is very much present in northern Mali, it's not because, they are only, working or targeting or attacking the radicalized Muslims over there. It's very much because there is uranium and oil and, under the soil, this is a very, very important place. And for economic reasons, they are dealing with the region. So it's true in Mali, it's true in Niger, it's true in their relationship. Look at what happened recently in Ivory Coast, where the president, Alassane Ouattara, was elected for the third time. He changed the constitution. Many Muslims are very happy because he is a Muslim. They don't get it, that in fact all this was done by the French in order for them to control the region. and to control the region and the economic interests. So economic interests are important. Ideological control, it's important as well for them. It's to know who is who and how they can deal with this. And once again, understanding that when it comes to migrations and when it comes to the reality of the countries in Africa, they still want to control everything. So, and they are still in control. Mm-hmm. Even though at the same time they are in competition with China and with the United States of America, who is going to, to take over and to keep the economic interest. So this is still the case, and you cannot understand the reality of the French involvement in Africa. For example, you have to come back to the Libyan crisis, which very much Obama said it, for example, very quickly. It's just the way, Gaddafi was killed is very much connected to the French way of dealing, because they wanted to get him and also to control everything which has to do with Algeria and Libya and oil in the region. So you can't just talk about the Muslims and Western Muslims should learn history, geopolitical realities and political strategies, to understand that sometimes the people are talking about your religion, but they mean their interests. So they have something else in mind, and we respond as Muslims and we say, okay, what are you talking about when it comes to radicals? And we understand that if the definition that we have today about radicals is the one used by the French, the first that they have to cut link with would be Saudi Arabia, but they're not going to do so.
Okay, Dr. Ramadan, we are in the final minutes of this broadcast, this conversation of ours, and I've enjoyed it very much. I would be remiss to end this conversation without asking you where things are right now with your case, with your situation. Close to 200,000 folks from all over the world have signed the change.org petition on your behalf, in your defense. Where are things right now with you, with your case?
Yes, thank you for asking the question. I just want our viewers and followers to get it. This discussion about the crisis and what is done and targeting Muslims, I said it from the very beginning. I'm going to be the first and others are following. And you have to keep this in the big picture. The perception that I was very much involved in, promoting a right understanding of Islam, asking for equal rights and saying, we are not going to be less Muslims in order to be more French and Europeans. We are both, period. And of course, this is not the discourse that they wanted, and they tried to find it. Now, after 3 years of this, proceedings and everything, we get it. We are reaching now the reality of what I said from the very beginning, and it's coming in the case now. What the French were trying to do is to keep the Swiss case in order to say, okay, we have one more even. It's not only French. In Switzerland, we also have one. At the beginning, they said even that there was one in the United States of America, and this was wrong. There was no case in the United States of America. This was wrong. This was the same people that were promoting, and tried to destroy my reputation. So now we had only France and Switzerland. The point is now that what is happening with the Swiss case is just revealing the connection between some of my enemies and the fact that she was connected for the last 10 years with some of the people, even asking for money. So what is good for me, they try to keep the Swiss case in France in order to add to my accusation, and now it's the other way around. So where we are now, over the last 3 weeks, We had a confrontation with the Swiss plaintiff, and it was a catastrophe for her because she had to acknowledge the fact that she asked for money, that she was dealing with a far-right Israeli paparazzo, Jean-Claude Elfassi, and all this is in the case now. So the Swiss judge is not having at all the same attitude towards the case as the French. Now he wants to look for the truth. And we are very, very confident about the fact that with the collapse of the Swiss case, it will shed light on the way I have been treated in France. Because it's known by all the lawyers. I was not treated the right way. So, my presumption of innocence, the fact that I was put in jail. And now what is revealed is all the connections that we had. If you want to understand who are the people who are also involved in this, just go back to my book I wrote almost 12 years ago called What I Believe. At the end of the book, I was mentioning some of the people who were ideologically my enemies. They started by saying he's a terrorist or he's a Muslim Brotherhood. He's supporting. All these failed at the end to come to this issue and to try now to put me in this situation. So I would say that, of course, some of the Muslim leaders are scared to speak about it because the case is still running. I don't mind. I can understand that. I just want them to be aware. Be careful. Be careful. Because if they can do it to someone, they can do it to everybody. I was the first, and now everything. Look at what is happening now. Some of the people in France who were silent when it came to me are now, they are now dismantling Muslim organizations, charity organization, Muslim. There is an organization which is working like CARE in France, the CCIF, the collective against Islamophobia in France. These people are now the interior minister is saying that we want to dismantle and to stop this organization. So this is happening now. And as to my case, I can tell you that everything that happened over the last year with all the proceedings and everything and the reality of the Swiss case shedding new light on the way I have been treated in France. And you have to get it, over the last year, 3 years even, and it started even in 2015, Charlie Hebdo, the way the cartoons they did on me is just outrageous. Outrageous. You can just, it's vulgar and it has a clear target, is Tariq Ramadan as a Muslim leader, as a Muslim scholar, as so this is where we are. So I'm just today we are very confident that things are moving the right way, alhamdulillah. So it's a question of patience, but it's also a question of saying to the Muslims, okay, you can be quiet today, don't speak out. I can understand that it's a sensitive issue, but at least be aware that anything could happen and they are ready for everything. And when I went through this is nothing compared to some of our brothers and sisters and A'imma, like Imam Jamil, who is in jail for how many years? Mm-hmm. And you know as much as I know that he's innocent. That's and right. we don't speak out. So
and Dr. Afia Siddiqui.
Exactly, because we talk about it. Exactly. Yeah. So I think that as to my case, I'm okay. Don't speak if you cannot speak, but we have to get it. That our silence when it comes to innocent people targeted, because the judges in France, they know as much as you know, and as I know that I'm innocent. They know that I'm innocent. They don't care. In fact, the point is destroy a reputation or destroy a life. I'm free. I'm outside, and I can, well, alhamdulillah, struggle for my rights. But I will never forget the people who are in jail and who are innocent in jail in the West. In the West, not only in dictatorship. So because we don't have to forget about what is happening with some of our leaders everywhere in the world. For example, in Saudi Arabia, we have great leaders in Saudi Arabia who are in jail. We have great leaders and political activists who are just experienced and promoting and asking for their rights, as we were talking about freedom of speech. So I think that we have to be quite clear here about our positioning. And my take on this is just to remind myself and to remind my brothers and sisters in humanity and in Islam, don't be silent. Don't be silent. Not because you are a Muslim, but for the sake of humanity. If you are silent when humanity and your fellow citizens are silent and the governments are putting people in jail while they are innocent, in fact, this undignified silence is making our humanity undignified in the way we are dealing with it. So I would say that this is where I stand, and inshallah, we knew each other and we have known each other for that. For we are not going to be silent and we have to speak out. And I would like the people who are listening to us now to get it and to avoid just confusing wise silent with cowardice. That's not the same. So silence could be wise when silence has to do with wisdom, but silence when people are oppressed, this is not wisdom. This has nothing to do with our religion and our principles. Wallahu a'lam wa ala wa ahkam.
Thank you, Dr. Tariq Ramadan, for joining your brother Saalakhan today in this conversation. It has really been a pleasure for me, and I'm sure that it has been a information-packed hour for the brothers and sisters around the world, Muslim and non-Muslim, who have seen this live, and for many others who will see it after the fact, as this video is being shared. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bless you and fortify you and your family, my brother. May Allah ta'ala clear the way for clarity and for justice for everyone, both Muslim and non-Muslim, throughout the world, who are being subjected to oppressive conditions. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless the Muslim ummah globally with the consciousness to rise up and to shoulder the sacred responsibility that we have as Muslims, as being the recipients of this final revelation to all of humanity. And this is an opportunity, this global climate that we're in, for a reset. May Allah bless us to take advantage of it. I'd like to end.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much for inviting me again and for your words. And let us remind our brothers and sisters, please pray for our brothers and sisters who are in jail. I was just thinking about Salman Auda, because his son is also in South Africa, in the United States of America, and so many others, Afia Siddiq and others. Yes. Let us think about them, and thank you again, really, from the bottom of my
brother.
Jazakallah.
Alhamdulillah. And we close Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim wal Asr. Innal insana lafi khusr. إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. جزاك الله.